Let's not let historical revisionism discolor what the Tea Party is really all about. The Tea Party is just unified Southern resistance to every initiative from any liberal progressive federal government of the United States. It has deep historic roots. The facts show that the Tea Party in Congress is merely the familiar old neo-Confederate Southern right under a new label. The persistent divides of every Democratic attempt to deal intelligently with national problems, be they recession, debt, or childhood obesity, has nothing to do with political ideology, taxes, healthcare, or acceptable degrees of federal authority. It has everything to do with nullification, disruption, zealotry, and division. It's part of a time-sharpened effort to debilitate nearly every Northern-led government by injecting it with the deadly sins of Southern politics, which includes xenophobia, racism, misogyny, homophobia, demagogic dishonesty, religious fanaticism, willful obstructionism, disregard for own self-interest, corporate supplication, disproportionate influence, and military adventurism. As an example, in its letter of secession from the United States, which was sent immediately after the election of President Abraham Lincoln, even before he took office, Texas of the old Confederacy stated the following: "We hold as undeniable truths that the governments of the various states, and of the Confederacy itself, were established exclusively by the white race, for themselves and their posterity, that the African race had no agency in their establishment, that they were rightfully held and regarded as an inferior and dependent race, and in that condition only could their existence in this country be rendered beneficial or tolerable. That in this free government all white men are, and of right ought to be entitled to equal civil and political rights." Emphasis in the original, that the servitude of the African race, as existing in these states, is mutually beneficial to both bond and free, and is abundantly authorized and justified by the experience of mankind, and the revealed will of the Almighty Creator, as recognized by all Christian nations, while the destruction of the existing relations between the two races, as advocated by our sexual enemies, would bring inevitable calamities upon both and desolation upon the 15 slave-holding states. It was merely the election of President Lincoln from a party that endorsed abolition, even if that president at the time did not make accomplishing that party of his platform or an agenda item of his administration, that drove the South in a complete overreaction to losing an election to begin to dismantle the nation state by state. And now today we see more and more Tea Partiers, while also overreacting to an election they lost, slowly endorsing the legitimacy of a new secession and further of absolute rights of the business owner over their employees as well as clients, and everything from denying them a living wage and working conditions to dictating whether they can have access to preventive services in their healthcare, impose fed time caps, and openly discriminate against those who had the temerity to previously get sick. Apparently modern Confederate Tea Partiers think the cruelty of that system is just fine. Does this sound like freedom and liberty? In the last few years there have been a rising of pro-Confederacy groups, who've written such amazing revisionist history such as this. Southerners have less reason to be loyal to the collective enterprise, that is the United States, than does any group of citizens. The South was invaded, laid waste, and conquered when it tried to uphold the original and correct meaning of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Yeah, right, the South was invaded. So much for those pesky letters of secession and that little Fort Sumter thing. Sure. And this happened merely because they felt they had the economic right to continue practices such as this. Slavery was evil. It was pure economic evil. Human cruelty for wealth and profit. The Confederates were trying to protect and continue that system of cruelty, of the theft of freedom, free will and choice for their own enrichment. But this is what they are, what they've always been. They know it in their hearts. And this is why they truly fear deeply in their bones an African-American president such as Barack Obama. It is beyond their comprehension that he isn't racked with a deep desire for vengeance against whites. How could it not be? What the modern Tea Party Confederate feels is something worse. Guilt. No, not their own personal guilt, but the collective guilt of centuries of cruelty. They constantly try to wipe it away, ignore it, deflect it, disguise it, but it continues to come right back, because they in their own heart of hearts simply don't believe that any nigger should ever be called Mr. President. It's fear driven by that guilt that also drove the Confederates, as it drives the Tea Party, and now the Republican Party. So of course, they have to do anything necessary to prevent this cruel retribution from being inflicted on the good white people. I mean the American people. They have to shut down the government, because that is the limited leverage they have with a majority in the House. They have to rail that Obamacare is a complete and total failure even, as hundreds of thousands successfully send in their applications despite initial website glitches, and are finding they can get better care for far less than they were previously spending. They have to deny reality, again and again and again. Obama was never a slave. None of his ancestors, on his father's side, were slaves. Most of what he knows about what it means to be historically black in America came from his white grandparents and their experiences during the 40s and the 50s as recounted to him. He has studied Langston Hughes and Baldwin and W.E.B. Deb to better understand the black experience. He lived it within his own skin, in law while attending Occidental College in New York while working for a non-profit, and Chicago working with communities to help incrementally improve their lives. He's seen it from just about every possible angle, and he's not rocked with anger. He's not driven to seek divine retribution against the ills of the white race. Obamacare is not punishment for the wickedness of long-dead white people. Some of those white people, going all the way back to the Revolutionary War, are his own ancestors. Obama is not a Kenyan, not a socialist, not a Muslim, not a Momo anti-colonialist, not a fist-pumping black power enthusiast. He's not Mr. Reed, nor is he the beggar. He's our American president. He's doing the best he can, under his power, to improve the lives of all American citizens. As did President Lincoln before him. Someday the Tea Party Confederates will learn I'm reaching a point with Tea Party Republicans, where I no longer know what to say to these people. The idiocy emanating from that part of the Republican Party is so vast, that they've passed the point of ideological political differences, and have fully embraced outright mental instability. I really believe these people have every intention to destroy the United States. It's the only way they can get what they really want. But what do they want, you ask? Well, a country based on a constitution they wished existed, crafted by theology controlled by the rich. See, the Constitution as it stands now doesn't support the kind of nation they want. They want some kind of constitution based on theocracy. Something that our current Constitution doesn't support. Which is clearly stated right from the beginning, where it says Americans have the freedom of religion, which also means freedom from religion and freedom to practice any religion. But we really can't just focus on Tea Party Republicans, because it isn't just about a label, as much as it is about the people involved. Sure, the people have flocked to the Republican Party, but long ago many of these areas, that are currently Tea Party-backed regions of our country were once filled with staunch Democrats. Well, that was back when Democrats embraced racism and religious radicalism. Then came the Southern strategy and the Republican push, to appeal to white racism in an successful attempt, I might add, to drive white voters to the grand old party. The rest, as they say, is history. So simply saying Republicans, when referencing this push to destroy our country, isn't 100% accurate, because some of these areas, and people, were once historically aligned with the Democratic Party. But as these people shifted from Democrats, to Dixiecrats, to Republicans and now Tea Party Republicans, they've made it clear that there's one group of people they support, and want in control of this country: wealthy, white, straight, Christian males. And that's basically it. But our Constitution doesn't set up a nation for that. Our Constitution has ended slavery, given women the right to vote, ended segregation, given women the right to choose what to do with their own body, provided a pathway for immigrants to become American citizens, separated church and state, ended segregation, given us the Civil Rights Act of 1965, protected voting rights, begun protecting same-sex marriage rights, defended Obamacare, and many other things, which aren't supported by Tea Party Republicans. Because we can't forget that historically, many of these areas that are very Republican are the same areas that supported slavery, opposed the right for women to vote, supported segregation, opposed civil rights, continue to attack voting rights, and stand strongly against Obamacare. So while the name of the political party might have changed over time, the backwards ideological beliefs of many of the people in these areas, specifically Tea Party Republicans, really hasn't changed much at all. Sure, there's been some evolution, but not much. After all, in many of these areas, they still don't even believe in evolution to begin with. Because let's be honest, have states like Arkansas, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, or Louisiana ever been on the right side of history on any of these issues, such as slavery, segregation, women's rights, or civil rights? Yet they believe they'll be on the right side of history when it comes to the battle over healthcare, gay rights, and our economy. Sure. But as they continue to lose battle after battle, Tea Party Republicans have seemingly embraced the idea that the only way they can build the country they want is by burning this one to the ground. I fully believe many of them want a full-on revolution. They want an economic collapse so disastrous that it turns millions of Americans on our government and pushes our country into complete and total chaos. There's little doubt in my mind that they believe by doing this they can create such a dire environment that they'll be able to build the government back up to what they really want. Because let's be honest, the Constitution in its current configuration will never let them build the kind of theocracy they want. Sure, they tell themselves that they're the party for constitutional values, but that's an absolute joke. They only support the Constitution the few times it supports their ideological beliefs. In the many instances it opposes their ideology, then suddenly many of them are talking of secession or revolution. Hell, these people run for office on the pretense that government is evil. They harp on this belief that government is horrible, out to destroy the American way of life, and cannot be trusted. Isn't it a little ridiculous to build an entire party to run for public office based on the notion of the evils of public office? Isn't it a little bit of a conflict of interest to run on the premise that government can't do anything right, then seemingly do everything in their power to make sure government can't do anything right? I know I can't be the only one who sees some kind of deep underlying ulterior motive that's driving this wave of Tea Party Republicanism. Because who really benefits from a weak government? It's not the American people, trust me. It's the rich. While millions of people preach about the horrors of government, complaining about the billions of dollars corrupting it, they seemingly fail to grasp the concept that the people behind corrupting our government are the very same people would love for it to be weaker. It would save them billions. They wouldn't need to buy off politicians, there wouldn't be any need. They'd bypass government and do whatever they wanted. And as this feudal Republican government shutdown continues, and the threat looms of economic collapse by not raising our debt ceiling, many Tea Party Republicans are celebrating all of this. They want everything to go straight to hell. After all, what would be better for a political movement that builds much of their platform on how terrible our government is than to sabotage and destroy it from within? They want us to fail. Because if we do, they'll get the opportunity to rebuild this nation based upon what they want. A theocracy, masked in a veil of constitutionalism, controlled by the richest of the rich among us.